Absolutely.
Oh, now we're recording. So, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this conversation about the Just Kitchen. My name is Sam Hamilton Poor. I'm the Southeast Atlantic Regional Representative to the Steering Committee of Presbyterians for Earth Care, and I welcome you on behalf of Presbyterians for Earth Care. And tonight, I'm going to introduce now our two authors, co-authors of The Just Kitchen. And after I introduce them, I'll have a short prayer, and then this is a conversation tonight. So I have some questions to pose to them, and we'll just see where that leads. And then we'll have them talk for 40 minutes or so, and then see if you have questions, and then we'll close at the hour with a prayer. So first, let me say this conversation tonight is looking at the Just Kitchen. Um, this is a great book, co-authored by Derek and Anna, and we're especially going to be talking about how what happens in the kitchen connects with caring for creation, which is what a lot of you I know are concerned about, especially, and we all have kitchens as well. So, but Derek is the director of theological education and formation at Creation Justice Ministries. He's also a member at large of the steering committee of Presbyterians for Earth Care, and currently lives outside Baltimore, Maryland, for now. And Anna Woofenden describes herself as a parent, a spouse, and priest, founding pastor of the Garden Church in San Pedro, California, as well as founder of Feed and Be Fed Farm. She now lives in East Hampton, Massachusetts with her husband and daughter, and she's the priest rector at St. John's Episcopal Church. She is passionate about spirituality, justice, food, the earth, community, and is driven by a calling to reimagine church. So welcome you two, and thank you for making time tonight to be with us from Massachusetts and Maryland to discuss your book. I'm going to use as our opening prayer a blessing from your book. It's from the chapter on the kitchen as a place of preparation, and it offers a blessing, a liturgy of blessing before we begin to cook, to set the space for a place of benediction and blessing. So I want to set this space as a benediction for tonight. So here we go. Before we begin, we breathe in and out, in and out. Before we begin, we notice what is here, what is not, what we let go of, what we welcome in. Before we begin, we set our hopes, our intentions, our prayers, that on this day, in this hour, in this space, we may be present to the love and the justice that is. Amen.
Man.
Amen.
Well, Derek and Anna, we were talking earlier. I heard an old saying that most books are written out of a need to be written on some level. And so the question I wanted to put out for you to begin with is, what need did you perceive in yourselves or in our world that led for you to create the Just Kitchen? And go however you want to go.
Sure. You want me to start?
Please.
Please.
Um, so Derek and I co-hosted. um, I I think we still do. It's just been on a long pause as life got full. Um, but a podcast called the Food and Faith Podcast, which is I started with another colleague of ours. a number of years ago now. And one of the things that even in the like I don't know what's it called, the mission statement, the tagline, that's the word I'm looking for the podcast, we said, from the soil to the table. And what we noticed was that throughout our conversations with guests from across the spectrum of people who cared about the intersection of food and faith, so, clergy, environmentalists, scientists, religiously, but no matter what we were talking about, we noticed this kind of two ends of the spectrum. Either people were talking about growing food, so we talking about farming and farming practices and getting churches to have gardens, or we were talking about eating together. So do we eat, dinner church, and how, maybe how you're sourcing your food. But what we noticed was everyone was missing the kitchen, and we kept jumping from where's the food come from to eating it. And there's this important piece in between. Um, and then at one point, I was approached by a editor asking for a book on cooking, and I kind of said, I don't. That's not my area of expertise. I can talk about church, I can talk about gardening, I cook, but like that's not my area of expertise. And I and sorry, can you hear me again? My AirPod is okay. Good, okay. I actually thought I had a different book in mind, and I was like, I don't actually have this expertise, but you don't tell an editor no. And, you don't have a good idea. So I called up Derek, and I said, hey, do you want to take this book? And what would you do? And he started brainstorming, and all of a sudden I was like, well, I could get excited about that. And I think that what I noticed and found as we began, and what we decided to do is to use the podcast. So the book is really based on a series of interviews that we did on the podcast, where we really tried to focus in on the kitchen, and still interviewing this broad, swath of people, but saying, actually, the kitchen is something we all have some relationship with the kitchen. It's not everyone cooks, but we all have some relationship with the kitchen. And it was really interesting, even in these interviews, when people knew we were interviewing them on the topic of food and faith in the kitchen for a book we were writing about cooking and the kitchen. Even with that context, that's how they signed up to when they said yes. Wander out into the and wander into the table. It was really hard to bring back to the kitchen. And one of my big learnings in the process was there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of inequality in the kitchen. There's a lot of the stories of the kitchen had big extremes, that was the place where I was connected with my grandmother, and it was so special, or that was the place where my parents were fighting, or that was or looking at more of the history of cooking, all the gender inequality and racial inequality that shows up by who's cooking the food. We talk a lot about who's growing the food, which is important as well, who's transporting it, but who's cooking it, and who's cleaning up after it, is a place. So I think for myself, I'd be curious how Derek answered this question, but the initial impetus for the book kind of came together, but I don't think I really knew the deep need for it until we were in the middle of
Oh,
starting to write. Like, I think it wasn't until after doing the interviews and starting to sort through things that it was like, oh, there's something, this is more than just interesting. There's something of some deep some healing that's needed for many of us, and maybe in a bigger societal way as well. So I think it was one of those projects that kind of schooled me along the way, as we were doing it.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would only add, um, yeah, the idea came from conversations that it felt like were missing from the podcast, but it was really just an observation. We weren't actually interrogating why those conversations were missing. But then in the writing of the book, we were forced to interrogate why those conversations about the kitchen were missing. And so, yeah, the actual need arose during the process. And I think the need of like my own personal reflection, and I think for Anna too, my own personal reflection about um, experiences I had with family, both as a child, experiencing adults cooking, and as an adult cooking for my children and my spouse, um, and how all of that was not neutral. It wasn't value neutral. It wasn't all joy, it wasn't all pain, but it wasn't neutral. And so that, I think, the need arose in the process, and I think we ended up asking questions during the course of the interviews that I don't think we really imagined we would be asking at the beginning.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what kind of question emerged later on?
Hmm.
It seemed to be important to ask.
I think I think we ended up having we ended up asking people questions about pain that they experience in the kitchen.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that maybe wasn't really our initial intent.
Right.
Mhm.
There are people for whom the kitchen was a space where they didn't feel safe, and it didn't
Right.
have all of these warm, fuzzy things. One of the really profound conversations we have is with our friend Jason, who has an eating disorder, and
Mm.
ending up talking about disordered eating. And I don't know that that was a conversation we anticipated happening. So I think some of the more painful, and I'm not sure how you would answer that, but I think some of the more painful pieces weren't necessarily explorations that we were planning on having.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think it was more personal too. And I think that went along with the pain. And I think that um food is very personal. And I think we actually kind of make it a little bit more impersonal. The growing end and the eating end can be a little bit more impersonal, but there's something about the kitchen that uh, it's encounters in a different way. And I feel like we were going into it with more of spirituality, which of course is personal, right? But also it was a little bit more theoretical, like, oh, right. So, what are the faith implications and the environmental implications of the kitchen and of cooking. And what we came out with was these really tender,
Mm.
powerful stories of people's own internal processes or their encounters with other people or that took place in the kitchen. And I think also it opened up a different piece of the spirituality. And I think part of that is there's other people in the kitchen, but it's not the same like communal experience that you have around the table. So I think there's this place for like wrestling and introspection, um, that in retrospect I realized, oh, I experienced that, but it was in the writing process and interviewing people that really came to the forefront in a different way of this is really a place for spiritual introspection, and this is a place where you can think the big questions while you're scrubbing the potatoes, or you can you know let your mind kind of wander while you're stir frying or whatever it is, and that's a powerful piece.
Well, thank you for those responses. And I just want to say a few words about your book too before I ask my next question. You see I have my little markers and things. Um, but it is a very personal book. It is very personal, and you disclose things about yourselves and your kitchen and your lives, as do the people you interview. It's also a very socially aware and dynamics, politically dynamics, like you say, power relationships and things like that in the kitchen. It also has recipes. Oh, gee. So, it has a little, not of everything, but many things in this book. And you named it The Just Kitchen. not the warm and fuzzy kitchen, not the whatever, but the just kitchen. So striving for uh, that space to become transformative. It is transformative, but in ways that we hope for in our lives and in our world. And which moves me to the next, and the chapter on the healing that takes place, because obviously there were a lot of concerns about pain and the need for healing, and you address that, the desire for healing that takes place. And on one thing you point out is healing our relationship to the creation. That somehow the kitchen you talk about and what we do there connects to this care for creation, and the healing of creation. And you write about that in chapter 6. And I just wondered if you might, for everyone, say a few words about what you mean by that and the connections to the healing of creation by through the kitchen. And if there's anything more you want to add to what you wrote, a year or two ago.
You want to start?
Sure. I think the first thing we just have to name is well, there's a couple things we have to name. Norman Wurzba has this great quote that cooking is our most intimate connection, or eating is our most intimate connection to creation. And we think of ourselves, from in a ecological way, that we are a species that eats other species, right? Um, and I think if we think about the environmental impact that our eating has, the ways we grow food, the ways we transport food, the ways we um, set aside land for the raising of animals and things of that nature. It's a pretty huge impact. It's a pretty significant part of the ecological crisis that we're in. So thinking about the healing of our relationship to creation, I think it starts with, in my mind, I think it starts with recognizing in the process of cooking, in a way that we sometimes don't if food is just brought to us or if we order food. You're so much closer to the creatureliness of the things that you're eating, whether they be plant or animal. You're so much closer to the creatureliness of the things that you eat when you cook them. When you are taking the seeds out of something, when you are cutting the roots off of something, when you are breaking down a chicken or breaking down a piece of fish, you're so much closer to the creatureliness. And I think that makes us think a little bit more about where those things come from. What is the life of those things? What has to die for us to live? And we think about our being part of creation in a different way. And I think part of the way that cooking can heal our relationship to creation, I think if we go to scripture, a lot of the scriptures that we kind of bypass in Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy and things like that, a lot of that is telling us how to honor what we are going to eat. Whether that's plant or animal, how we honor, how we give God gratitude for the rain and the soil, how we take care of an animal that is going to be eaten to make sure that it experiences as little pain as possible. That's what a lot of that flyover part of the Bible is really talking about, and it's really kind of bringing us back into our relationship with creation. So, um, yeah, there's a lot I can say about this part, because I think it's incredibly important that we experience ourselves not outside of creation, but as a part of creation. And in cooking, we can have some of that experience. And I'll kick it over to you. And I'm sure both of us have a lot to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. It makes me think one of the things that we really tried to do throughout the book is to not have there be like a 15-point plan that you have to do or you fail at. And we actually pushed back pretty hard. Our title was A Just Kitchen, and our I think it's the well, someone at the publishing house insisted no, like the was a stronger than but I think the reason for wanting to be a just kitchen is that there's no one right way to do this. And you will not find anywhere in this book, here's the 5 things you do to have a just kitchen. And here's how you fail at having a just kitchen. And we firmly like throughout, admit the pizza boxes or the, mac and cheese. I mean, that this isn't about uh perfectionism, or that we can, if we all did all these things, then suddenly the climate crisis would be over, right? There's so many bigger forces at work. And to build on what Derek just shared, I think our hope and our thread throughout the book is that the kitchen is a place for introspection and reflection and intention. And I think that intention that can come, that we can foster in the kitchen, is the same kind of intention that we need as we are purchasing, as we are engaging with waste, as we are uh, voting, as we're doing all these other pieces that affect climate. That that act of eating, I know for me, I mean, one of the things that and I don't have like some solution. I mean, I haven't I have not rooted out plastic out of my kitchen, right? It's really, really hard to do. And I am much more aware of plastic in general because of the work to be aware of plastic in the kitchen, and how, you know, uh, trying to buy more bulk. I mean, there's plenty of plastic that's going to go out in our trash can tonight. Uh, that kind of it's building those muscles of awareness, and then be able to make those choices when we can. And I think that um, is it's not specific to the kitchen, but a kitchen is a good place to build the muscles that then can go out into other parts of our lives. Um, the other thing I would say is, I just said, there's no like, there's one thing you have to do, but we did go a little bit like hardcore on composting, because we both feel pretty strongly on that. So we do end the book by saying, if there's one thing, there's one thing. And I know for myself, when I started really, I mean, I grew up composting, so it wasn't an unfamiliar thing, but there were a number of the years there where it wasn't easily accessible. And actually, when I moved to LA, in a little apartment, I didn't have my own compost, but I was really committed to it. And I just remember, like, there was such a shift about paying attention to how much food I was wasting when I was putting it into the compost. And I think that again gets back to that intention piece. So what are the ways that we're paying attention? And then, and if you grew your own food, or somebody you knew grew it, or got it from the farmer, if you put that food in the compost because it sat in your crisper for too long, like, it's a whole different feeling than if it just came from the grocery store. And I think that some of these practices can make some much more major changes in our own lives. And then I hopefully, again, echoing out from our own households into these bigger societal changes and moves that we need to make. So, but I think just like the climate crisis can't be solved, like, us all recycling isn't the whole answer, right? Like, it's also multifaceted. I think food encompasses that. Our founding co-host, Sam Chamberlain, often say that food, if you pull on the thread of food, if you're looking at a whole entangled, interconnected web and justice issues, if you pull on that thread of food, you get to all the other issues. They're all connected, and I think that's similar with climate. And it certainly is very, as Derek was pointing out, very connected, intimately connected to climate.
Interesting. It's not only what we eat, but how we eat that makes us who we are. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for those reflections. Maybe someone, and we'll be doing questions and answers later on for everybody. So be thinking if you want to follow up on any of this with them afterwards. But thank you for that response, and sort of connected, not sort of, but connected to this is, which caught my attention in reading the book, is toxic charity you write about when it comes to food, the misuse of food, the seeming benevolent use of food, but is a misuse. And that's in, I can't remember which chapter that's in,
It's 8.
which is
I think it's 8.
8. Um, Anything you
I
want to
think
add
so.
to that
Yeah.
about toxic charity and food and relationships?
I think one of the reasons we wrote this, and so this is sort of thinking about the ways that we use our church kitchens or our other feeding ministries and things about that. One of the things I think we've both become really hypersensitive to is the power dynamics that can exist when we are doing something like a food pantry or a cooking ministry, and the ways in which those of us who are, even with good intentions, serving can have power over those that we're serving, and in some ways it can be really dehumanizing. And actually, if you don't mind, I want to read this quote because it's not a quote from us. It's a quote from our friend who we were just talking about, the Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III, who's the founder of the Black Church Food Security Network. And I really love this quote. And it's funny, like most of the times when I quote the book, I'm actually quoting something that somebody else said. But he says, charity does not equal justice. Charity can mask our understanding of the root of the problem. Prolonged engagement with charity can corrode the soul of those in need. It can wear away our sense of human dignity, our somebodyness. The flip side is that when economically affluent, often white-led organizations are constantly in the posture of giving, it can also corrode the soul of the giver, who's always in a position of superiority. Food charity is a sweet siren song. It is not a sustainable track toward the beloved community. And I just think that that's for all of us who are connected with churches, who are in churches. I think it's so important for us to be thinking about, especially in this time, as SNAP benefits are going away, as the need for food charity is going to increase. How do we do this in a way that continues to hold on to the dignity of those who are being served? I think that's such a critical question that we are going to be facing as the challenges of the government shutdown, the challenges of our political landscape, to use that overused euphemism. As that continues to play itself out, we need to be asking these questions of, in those spaces where we need to be doing acts of mercy, how do we preserve people's dignity?
Mhm. Yeah, and I would just add to that, and I think this connects beyond food to uh, you know, acts of justice work in general. That what are we doing to make ourselves feel better and to alleviate our uh, discomfort with our neighbors who are in need? And what are we doing that is actually leading to a more just and generous world? And I think often I know in my own being, when I am acting more in that toxic charity, more of that I'm like, well, I know what you need. It If I get quiet enough, if I take enough introspective time while cooking, right? Um, I realize that I have a deep discomfort of really engaging with somebody long enough and with deeply enough to listen to where they are and what their need is. And so I think uh, especially for these bigger systemic things, it's the jump straight to like, well, I just need to do something. Like I need to do something is much more about me than it is about
Mm.
actually caring about the bigger issue. And so often, I mean, I think we've all experienced this in different ways, but the thing that I think, like okay, SNAP benefits are, okay, I'm going to go out and buy a bunch of food and have it ready to hand out, I don't know, wherever. Well, as soon as you talk to anyone who knows about the system, no, I'm going to write a check to their survival center who can still get things at bulk and knows exactly what they need and has the mechanism to distribute and knows who, right? Like, but doesn't it feel better to me to go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of Cheerios, right? Right? Then I could, but that's not, so I mean, that's just kind of a basic example, but I think that we do this a lot in our lives, and uh whatever our lived areas are not our own lived experience, we quickly just kind of jump to assumptions, and often not only is it not helpful, I think often it's harmful. It's toxic.
Thank you for again, something that can take place through food has reverberates throughout other areas of eco justice, and in toxic ways. So thank you for addressing that. I wanted to point out that this coming Saturday is All Saints Day, and for many of us, we'll be doing All Saints Sunday this Sunday, not the service on Saturday, but on Sunday. And it's Luke's version of the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, the hungry, the thirsty, the poor. And woe to you. You remember, it also has the woes. And I was really struck by Gary Nabin's version of the Beatitudes in your book. It's on page 43, those of you who have a book. And I wondered if one of you might read those, and let's see where it moves you after that to what you might talk about. It's in the section, let's see, on
I'm happy to read it.
Seeking solidarity with those who feed us. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, and I think if you haven't read Gary's book, Jesus for Farmers and Fishers, Justice for all those marginalized by our food system, I highly recommend it. And it's a lot of direct crossover to environmental concerns as well. So he uses this reimagination of the Beatitudes to really refocus our attention. And so he writes, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, especially at the margins of the greatest surplus of food in the history of the world. Blessed are those who flip burgers in fast food drive-ins, who fill burritos in taco trucks, and who go from house to house with coolers of homemade goods hidden in their trunks. Blessed are those who patch together their shelters from pallets and tarps. Blessed are those who glean their meals from the produce dumped at the edge of the fields. Blessed are those who are famished and fatigued when nightfall comes. Blessed are those who pray for Jesus to arrive with fresh loaves and fishes. Blessed are those who live with fear that immigration and naturalization services will show up with handcuffs and paddy wagons to deport them." Which is all too immediate these days, isn't it?
It is.
And I think we could all add so many to that list. And there's somebody in the chat earlier was reflecting on those who have been displaced from their kitchens. I know one of the things that when I was at the Garden Church, which is an outdoor ministry, and a lot of our folks were living outdoors, one of the things that people talked about really missing was being able to cook. And we didn't really have a great solution for that, but sometimes we did some makeshift things, like we brought in a crock pot or something, because it wasn't just being fed that people were looking for. It was also, I want to actually be able to cook for myself and for the community in that way. So I think it's really deeply important in this conversation about the kitchen to think about so many of our neighbors don't actually have access to the kitchen, to a kitchen, let alone their own kitchen, and a kitchen that is a safe and a healthy place to be.
Right.
And that's a real injustice.
Well, thank you. Let me, before I open it up to the Zoom sphere, for questions, and we have some in the chat already. Just Derek and Anna, is there a question you wish I'd asked?
Hmm.
You think, oh, I really wish you'd asked me about chapter so and so, or yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
because I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
I don't
No?
think so. I
Okay.
think
Okay.
Yeah.
you've done a good job, Sam.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Lucy in the chat said your book is a book about food with recipes, not a recipe book.
That's
So,
very
but
true.
the recipes are really good ones. And Mindy prepared one of the recipes yesterday.
I made the red beans and rice last night. It was a big
Nice.
hit.
Excellent.
Good.
Excellent.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I would say that it's a great book for young couples starting out. We really tried to write it for anyone who is exploring these questions, and I think I hope our goal was it was pretty accessible. But I would second, it is not a cookbook. It is a book about cooking in the kitchen, and it does have some recipes, which is fun, and there's some stories. All of the recipes come from people we interviewed, so the recipes are all connected to the stories. Um, but it is not your typical cookbook, and we've had to explain that a lot somehow. People like, has recipes, is it a cookbook? It's like, well, yes, but no. We do hope, though, it also has a lot of liturgy in it. It has prayers and blessings, like the one that you started with, Sam. And so we do hope, and we're grateful to our publisher, to Broadleaf, that it does lay flat, so you can have it in your kitchen, it might be on the shelf with your cookbooks. So that we really pictured like that it become, food stained and well used and worn in your kitchen.
Well, let's see if there are any questions from our other participants here. Mindy, you maybe have a view of anyone raise a hand or put something in the chat. There's someone. Can you read that, Anna?
Sure. So Sarah says, just yesterday I read in my newspaper that a recent study has shown that even if we manage to switch to clean energy, we would not be able to avoid the effects of climate change if we don't sustainably reform our food system. Among the people I know in my church who are very aware of the need to switch to clean energy, many of them are nonetheless very resistant to change their food practices to help reduce climate change. It somehow touches on a deeper emotional chord. What's your thought about this? I mean, Sarah, that just really connects with what we found in our interviews and in our conversations. And I think that kind of gets to that tenderness that we were talking about earlier, that the way that we have learned to eat is deep in there, and the way that we've learned to prepare food. I also would say, though, that I hope that some of the invitations in this book can help people to start to make that connection more directly. And also, our hope is that it's a gentle enough invitation that people, are changed over time. That, like I said, maybe you just start composting. Like we don't. It's very interesting as we were preparing the book. People are like, well, obviously, some people are like, well, obviously, you're going to say that veganism is the only way to go, or obviously, you're going to say that vegetarian. And we're like, I mean, we did interviews on that. There's some sections. There's definitely environmental pieces in that, and we both personally, I don't know where you're at right now, Derek, but I still am eating meat. I don't know where you're at.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay. So, but do I try to do more sourcing differently? Sure. Is it perfect? No. But so I hope my prayer is that the conversations that can come out of these conversations we had that went into the book, and the conversations that any of us can have with people at church or friends or loved ones, is it's not you have to move from here all the way over to here, right? It's taking a step or taking a couple of steps. And so yeah. And the other thing I would say on this question, which I think feels like kind of goes back honestly a little bit to the toxic charity piece, is that to reform our food systems is not something that any one of us is going to do in our kitchen, right? This is about where the money is, and this is about where legislation is, and this is about who benefits and who doesn't benefit from these bigger pieces. And like so many parts of our country and world, yes, we all have to do our parts, and it's so much bigger than us. And so I think that ways that we can keep an integrity in our own kitchens and lives while also, so we don't just want to throw up our hands and be like, well, what's what I'm going to do going to help, right? We all do their pieces, but also to know that me doing it perfectly in my home is not going to be the total answer either. And so how are we both changing our individual practices and having the energy and attention to how to change these bigger systems? Because it's there's a lot of the big machine out there, right? There's a big machine out there, and food systems are a big part of that. I don't know, Derek, if I'm sure you have more to say on that.
Yeah, and hi Sarah. I just got to meet Sarah last week. Was preaching at her presbytery.
Oh,
Thank you.
So I just led for the season of creation. I just led an adult ed class on creation justice because that's what I do. And it's really interesting how how much easier it is for people to wrap their minds around driving an electric car, even things like putting on solar panels and things like that. When you get to food, it is personal there because um, you're not just talking about buying a new product. You're talking about a story. You're talking about a story that, like, foods that come from our childhoods, foods that come from our ethnic and cultural heritage, foods that come from comfort foods that mean something to us from that really dark period of time that when we went through hell. And man, so that still brings me back to that comfort. We're talking about something that strikes a much deeper chord for most people. And so the invitation does have to be a gentle, non-shaming one. You know, thinking a little bit about one of the big changes for me has been thinking about where does, if I choose to eat meat, am I willing to meet the animals before I eat them? Like, am I willing to go to a farm? Am I willing to look an animal in the eye before I eat it? And like that's a conversation. If you're gonna have that experience, you're gonna pay more for meat. And I think we all agree that we could be eating less meat. But if we're sourcing it really well, because I just have to say this, the people I know in my life who love animals the most are the ones who raise them for me. And like that is a hard thing for a lot of people to get their heads around, it's 100% been my experience that is the case. And so how do we also then care for those people who are trying to do it the right way? One of the things that we're trying to do in this book is yes, what we do in our individual kitchens, Anna's absolutely right. It holds no candle to what big corporations, the 100 corporations that are creating 71% of the emissions, um, are really doing to us. But it raises awareness of the fact that food can be raised differently. Food can be grown differently. food can travel a shorter distance to get to our plates if we're willing to have some intention about it. And that then does affect the ways that we vote and the ways that we spend our money and the ways that we invest in certain parts of our system. Um, so I think inviting people into the conversation because food is so readily available in our culture for most of us that we can mindlessly consume it. And this is asking us, part of what we're doing in this book is asking people to slow down and to think a little bit about where food comes from. And a lot of that thinking happens in the kitchen. A lot of the reflection can happen in the kitchen.
No.
I would say that that goes right into Jane's question about, do you
Mm,
ever pay attention to all the people who are required to get the food to you before you purchase it? And I was just going to mention in chapter 2, we talk a lot about this, about the sourcing and again, like what's the practice? And we actually have a liturgy. The prayer in that section is called a tracing blessing, and it's basically like Mad Libs for your dinner. Um, and so it like starts off, thanking God for the like earth renourished it, especially, and then it's like names and the places and soils where the food was grown, for the people who planted it and watered it and cared for it. Name the people or groups of people who farmed your food, etc., who transported it, who prepared it, etc. And I found it's actually really hard. So if like I tried to prepare a meal where I actually, was like writing this, like filling it in, and um the things that I got out of the garden, that was easy. Okay, I got some in the farmer's market. That was pretty easy. Like I had to remember like which farm did I buy it from. But you get into anything that's prepackaged, um, or the produce you got at the grocery store, but you didn't. It's not in a bag. So where's the label? And are you looking? I mean, it quickly was like, oh my gosh, there are so many different people involved getting this particular, this rice to my table. So I think we that intention and even that prayer, like that prayerful process, brings a greater awareness to all the people involved in, yeah, even if you cook a meal, quote, from scratch, there are a lot of people that got that food to your kitchen in the first
Right.
place.
That's right. Derek, in your book, you talk about members of your family who and this brings you hope. You say that they're being very conscious of their eating and have decided to become vegetarian. And that's interesting. To have because in our own family we've played with vegetarian a little bit, and it doesn't have to do for us, it's about the large confinement animal suffering,
mhm.
and not being able to connect. I mean, I have to say, I don't want to look the animal in the eye, but I would like to know something about where this has come from
Yeah.
and quality. So that's just for whatever it's worth. We're going back and forth, and we're not shaming ourselves. But we're trying to work through that. And let's see, anyone
Uh,
else? Yeah, go ahead. I'm
And
sorry.
I
Sam,
oh
just very quickly, and because I want to follow up, and I just want to be like 100% transparent here, because none of my kids are vegetarian anymore.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But
So that's
but
changed. But
but but I still so much relish the conversations that we had
yeah,
during that period, and
right.
we still are having those conversations about where food comes from and how we source food better, and thinking about all of the things that come into getting food on your table. Um, we have a mutual friend, Karen Mann, who for a long
that's what I was
time.
about to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
And
go for it.
she is someone who for a while was raising pigs and for to go to market. And the thing that Karen said to me that I think is just, one, she talks about like looking her animals in the eye before they were sent off to be processed because, you aren't allowed to do that on your own property. But the thing that she always said about her animals is, my animals have one bad day. And I think about those large confinement things that we have, CAFOs, and I think about how every day of an animal's life is a bad day for that animal. And the idea that there are people out there who are doing regenerative agricultural practices, who are trying to raise their animals the right way, and are trying to make sure that their animals that they raise have one bad day.
Mhm.
That is a we have to include those people in our thinking about the food system. We
Mhm.
have to include the fact that um, yeah, humans are a part of creation too, and if we're doing good creation care, we're also caring for the humans who are in the food system.
Well, that
Yeah.
makes me think too. I just was just a couple days ago, in my, in my day job, was having a conversation with Grow Food Northampton, which is a local food place, and I was asking, so where are you seeing with the SNAP benefits running out? Like, where is that? And she went right to that their organization, which is a kind of a network nonprofit, is the biggest um, wholesale customer for a number of our local farms because they buy from this federal grant, which many of you may know about, which was to be able to buy from small farms to then have it available for the fresh produce available for SNAP, for the food bank and for some of the distribution centers. And it was so interesting because I think again it's like my brain had so quickly gone to like the people who needed to get the food, and where she went was, this means our farmers aren't going to have business, right? So it's not just that people aren't going to get the food, it's that these small scale farmers, their ability to sustain and to do this work is being cut off as well. And I think that that's one of the really, really challenged parts of our food system right now, is
Right.
that it's not only large scale operations being able to do it at a lower cost. It's also like what gets subsidized and what doesn't, and where are the pipelines to customers, um, and the people who are struggling are often the small scale, be it meat or vegetable or fruit, whatever kind of farming. But here we are. Do you see how you run back to the farm and to the the table, right? Because I mean they're all connected, but it's like yeah. So how do we hold that?
Dinner in the kitchen. Yeah. Well, let me see if there's one more question. Someone or a comment. Anyone?
Sam, someone asked,
Thank
how
you.
would you suggest using your book as a class or group study?
Yeah, there's. Oh, go ahead.
No,
I said
please.
I think it works well for one, and I believe that the workbook is still up on Broadleaf. We
Mhm.
can put that in there is a workbook for
Wasn't aware.
groups,
Yeah.
and we'll make sure we get it to you, Sam, if maybe Derek's gonna find it right now.
Good.
um but it was designed specifically for doing in groups, and yeah, we've seen a lot of groups do it, and some of them even group that actually did it at my church, um a couple of times during the time, cooked a meal together for one of the recipes in the book, so that was kind of fun.
Nice.
But there are 10 chapters, so it's kind of a nice like 10-week book study.
Okay. Well, listen, we need to make some announcements. We're coming close to the end of the hour. Let me thank you again, both of you, for being here tonight and sharing with us, and thank you for your book. Thank you for your commitments, and for being with us tonight. And before we go, Mindy, we have an announcement? Yes, something's coming
Yes,
up.
just want to take a quick
There you
second while we have so many people here, and now I need to figure out. Here we go. Here it is. Just to mention, we just next week, a week from today, we're having a webinar, and I saw her on here earlier. I don't know if she's still here with us or not, but Shannon Vance Ocampo will be presenting a webinar on connecting with your ecological self, which I believe, and Courtney can probably elaborate better than me, will lead to a workshop with PEC in the spring. Am I saying that correctly, Courtney?
That's correct. 5
Okay.
weeks, I think, a 5-week series for pastors and lay leaders. Yeah.
Okay, so that's next Monday, and we'll open up registration for that tomorrow. Also, one more thing I wanted to bring up is that we are offering winter solstice worship service, creation care based, and I know Lucy is on here tonight. I don't know about Barbara, but they will be leading us through a service related to the earth and the winter solstice. So
Okay.
I'll stop
Thank you,
sharing.
Mindy. And thank you all, everyone, for coming tonight and being part of this. I'm going to close with another liturgy from the Just Kitchen. It involves you all. I will make a series of statements about God, to God, and your response is, we celebrate with you. We celebrate with you. And you can do that muted or unmute or whatever you would like to do. So let us celebrate. God, who delights in all you have created, we celebrate with you.
With you.
God, who nourishes the seeds in the earth,
We celebrate with you.
with you. God, who is in the hands that cultivate, we celebrate,
celebrate with you.
With you.
God, who guides us in relationship, we
We
celebrate,
celebrate
with you.
Yeah.
God, who delights in the small and the large, we celebrate with you.
With you.
God, who sets time apart and who is in the ordinary,
We celebrate,
We celebrate
with
with
you.
you. God, who is in our kitchens with us, we
We
celebrate.
celebrate with you.
With you.
And God, who is holding all things, we celebrate.
Celebrate
with
with you.
you.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
We are having a